Start. So the MOOCs course on human behavior. So generally what we do in these sessions is I take up questions that that's it. Okay, so as you mentioned, we have a little bit of glitch here. So as I'm mentioning, you can start asking your questions and I'll start responding to your questions based on whatever I know about human behavior and human psychology. So let's start up this session. Let's take up some questions. I don't have a question right now, neither on my YouTube feed nor on the live chat session that we have on the Meet. However, the Excel sheet does have one question that I'll take up. And then as people start joining into the live session and start asking questions, I'll be going up and answering those for you. So there's one question from Mary Caroline, and Mary asks, how does a person can lead a life smoothly when a circumstances being not as good? So that's a nice question. When circumstances are not good, how do you lead a good life? For that, more than psychology, you'll have to learn a little bit from philosophy, particularly the Indian way of philosophy. And so what it says is that people should be contented. So people should be satisfied or contented, and they should be always striving to do better. So I've taken some theories from human psychologist or the approach of humanist. And what they talk about is that people are generally good, and so they strive to become better. And so when even if the circumstances are not very good, how do you live a good life? Mantra to that is being satisfied. So people should be more thinking about doing or doing the karma or doing what you are supposed to be doing rather than expecting things. See, more unhappiness comes from expecting. Also, circumstances are something which is external to you and they have very little control on you. It may be that you don't have money, but then you may find ways of achieving your excellence, right? So even if when circumstances are not there, there's a lot of ways in which you can deal with the circumstances. Sometimes you can avoid them, sometimes you can deal with them, or sometimes you can just flow with it. And the basic way to feel good or to be good is to think about not you as a whole, but think of you as a part of the whole human system as such. So don't think of you as an individual, because when you do that, you sort of bind yourself, and then things like the seven sins comes in, and all the idea of expectations, dissatisfaction comes in. So even when circumstances are not good, you can choose to avoid it or choose to deal with it. And while doing it, try to do what you're supposed to do without expecting some kind of a result. And when you do that, you will find that slowly, what will happen is you will leave the circumstances. When you do what you're supposed to do, you will start feeling an internal happiness, which will make you move forward. So there are ways to deal with this negative circumstances. So I hope that should answer. The key motto should be doing your work without any expectation and trying to either deal or to, if possible, to avoid those circumstances. So when you work or when you strive to be good, you can always change your circumstances. Circumstances are very temporary, but you are as a human being are more permanent. So there are a lot of ways in which you can change your circumstances around you and you can actually be good. So I hope that answers your question, Mary. There are no more questions that I have on the Excel sheet. People have named the state here. So I believe people don't have questions, at least on the sheet. I don't find any questions running on this YouTube live session as well. Neither I have questions on this chat forum. So another thing which I wanted to share with you is I am proficient with both the languages in Hindi and English. So you're welcome to ask questions in both Hindi and English. Language should not be a barrier. And you can start asking questions in any of these languages, and I'll try and answer to you or satisfy your curiosity with whatever knowledge, limited knowledge I have about this subject matter of psychology. So for those people who are listening in or those people who are connected to us either through the YouTube session or through this team session, what I'll do is I'll ask you to start putting up questions or telling me your feedback or giving us suggestions how to make this course better. Ask any question that you have in mind relating to psychology, relating to this course, and I'll be happy to answer. Now, I'll give another 5 or 10 minutes for you to ask questions, but if I don't get questions, there is no point in carrying forward this one-way communication, one-way session. So I'll wind up. So I'll be here for I'm here for actually another hour. So what I'll suggest is, or what I'll rather ask you to do is to start asking questions, because if you ask questions, I'll be in a position to answer those. And these live sessions are generally meant for one-to-one interaction or face-to-face interaction with those students who are learning from the MOOCs NPTEL videos. So as you are here, as you are with me, let's start answering questions and looking at your suggestions. So do that. And if I don't get any questions within the next 5 to 10 minutes, what I'll do is I'll probably end this session. So I have one question. So which type of question is asked in the main exam? Will it be assignment related? So the question that we will get in your main exam, or rather the NPTEL exam, would be all multiple choice questions. There'll be 50 in number, 2 number for each question, which means that you have a total of 100 questions. And the division is that some questions are generally taken from your assignment. Some questions are based on your assignment, and some new questions are also there. So we have a ratio of how many questions to take in from assignment and coming in from as new questions. And based on that, the new question paper or the final question paper is prepared. But I can assure you one thing, that if you go through the assignment, if you do the assignment properly, or even if you ever after we have finished an assignment and you look at your even if you have answered incorrectly and you get an answer and try to search for it or ask us a question and we'll give you an answer, even if you do properly your assignments, you will be scoring good marks. Now, of course, if you want to do very good, what you need to do is also study books which have been proposed for this particular course. So what I'll do is I'll suggest to you to go through the books, go through the lectures, and then prepare yourself and go through the assignments and prepare yourself for the final exam. I have another question from Harsh, and he says how to understand a difference differ human behavior. Uh, different human behavior, different human behaviors. Harsh, it would be much better if you could just rewrite this question in a much easier manner. So, what I understand is how do you understand different behaviors, human behavior? So, the only way to understand human behavior is to focus yourself on what is causing the behavior and what is the behavior, and then probably look at all those cognitive facts or mental facts which is causing the behavior. And if you do that in an experimental way or in a sequential way, you will be able to understand the reasons behind the behavior. Why do you want to study human behavior? Because you want to find the reasons. So if you can probably break the behavior reductionist approach, or if the behavior cannot be broken, then see it as a finality, you'll be able to understand the reason. So that is what I believe your question was. So Saurav has a question. I have a research problem. Can you, sir, guide me to implement? Sure, Saurav. So go ahead with your research problem. Let's see if I can answer it for you. Harsh, yes, it's different. So different human behaviors and the way you understand different humans. Basically, what you want to know is why do humans behave differently? Now, understand that this is the beauty of it. There is a term in psychology which is called individual difference. The beauty of human behavior, the beauty of psychology is that all of us are different. So even if we are different, we are same, right? So the idea here is that uh, what we tend to do is we study different people, right? And when we study them, we try to guess or attribute what is the reason for it. This is common sense. But if you have a knowledge of psychology, you'll be able to predict with much probability or much certainty why somebody is doing that. Because when you have a knowledge of psychology, you'll be able to not only count or see those reasons which are evident uh, uh, in front of you, but also overt reasons, not only covert reasons, but overt reasons from your knowledge of theories about psychology. And then you will be able to understand or give an attribution or give a reason for why a person is doing. And once you do that, your response to that person will be different. So a study of psychology or knowledge of psychology or theories of psychology will give you all those possible reasons why a person is behaving. Common sense works, but it doesn't work everywhere, and it at most of the time it misleads you. So knowledge of psychology will actually help you in understanding behaviors. Then if you have more questions, or I'm stuck here, so no more questions here. Saurav, if you could ask your question, I can probably answer. And so I'm still sitting here for answering your questions. I'll be here for another 10 or 15 more minutes if nobody asks a question. But if you have a question, I'm here for the whole hour. So do start asking your questions. I'll start taking your questions, and then I'll start answering it for you. So please go on, ask your questions, whatever comes to your mind in relation to psychology. So is this a human behavior question? This is human behavior course, rather, not question. You can ask probably most of the things related to human behavior, and I'll try to satisfy your queries with whatever limited knowledge I have about this subject. So Saurabh, I'll contact you, sir, through email. Can you write me an email ID? Yes, Saurabh, please do that. And if you have a question, here also a short question, you can ask that. Probably the email ID is given on this NPTEL website. If you don't, just log into the IIT Guwahati website and go to the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, and there you'll see my name. Because if I write, I'm probably not writing it here. Uh, it may create problems for the people, or it may also divert me from this live session. So just log into the IIT Guwahati website and go to the Humanities Department, and there you will see my profile. And within that, you'll also have the website and my lab number. If you want to contact, please go ahead, write an email to me through that website, and I'll try and answer that for you. So then I have Kush Sharma, who is asking about the pattern of the examination. The pattern of the examination is basically it's all multiple choice question, 50 in number. Some of them carried from the assignment, some of them new in but it is fabricated on the assignment, and some new questions are added on to it, and that is how the pattern for the final exam would be. So Lakshmi asks a question: why do human behavior vary from person to person, even in the same situation? When does hormones come into action? What initiates the hormonal action on brain? Okay, let's then break your question into many parts. First, the first part is why do humans behavior vary from person to person, even in the same situation? The idea here is that try and understand one thing, that doing psychology or studying psychology is difficult than studying any other natural science. The reason being that when you are studying any other natural science, let's say physics or chemistry, you are a person out of the differential frame. So you are experiencing something which is out of you. Studying psychology is like an atom studying an atom. So what happens is you are the person who is conducting the research, and you are conducting research on someone just like you. So human psychology is that is why difficult, and it is never it's always stochastic in nature. It is never definitive or deterministic in nature. Stochastic really means it's random and or basically probability based, and then deterministic is basically saying that it has determinable cause, or it is basically fixed, right? So take two hydrogen atom, mix it with oxygen, you have water, but the same is not true for humans. So place a person, same person in the same situation once and he'll behave differently, but place the same person in the same situation again, everything being same, he will behave differently. The reason for this is there can be two reasons. Look at it from the person's point of view. What the person who's doing the behavior does is he has his own biases, or he has his own way of inputting information. And so two situations, they they are encoded very differently by the same person. Although the situations are same, the person is the same, his knowledge is same, and the encoding receptors are same, but his prior experiences and biases that he has will differentiate or will cause a change in his perception of the problem or perception of the situation. And because of that, what will happen is he will respond differently. Look at it from the observer's point of view. The person who is observing is also a person, is also of the same variety, who is encoding or who is doing the action. Now, even for him, the same action that this person does can be encoded differently or can be seen differently depending on different situations, or how his own biases, his own value systems, or his own environment, or so many other things can come into play. And that is the reason why two different people or the same person in two different situations which are very similar, they behave differently. Now, when does hormone come into action? What initiates the hormone action on brain? Hormones can come into action. Hormones are basically what? It's a chemical transmitter. And so when do they come in action? There are different kind of hormones, and they the action depends upon different kind of initiation mechanisms. For example, there is a hormone for let's say your different way, or there is the ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Different kind of hormones are controlled by different mechanisms, and depending on what is controlling or what is the initiation, which stimulus is initiating it, they start coming into action. Now, how do they affect the brain? Two kinds of hormones are there. We have endocrine and we have an exocrine. One which flows through a duct system, and one which acts in terms of something called the blood. Now, the ones which takes in from the blood, of course, most hormones cannot enter the brain. The reason being that you have something called a blood-brain barrier, but there is a possibility of they affecting it. And so what really happens is that the signal can come from the brain of producing these hormones. And what these hormones actually do is they are kind of a transmitter. So they basically the signal the release of certain kind of chemical messengers, or they are themselves sometimes chemical messengers which signal a certain process in the brain. It could be it could be the release release of certain kind of chemicals which can maintain sugar, or it could be some other kind of mechanisms for doing certain kind of actions. So that is how the hormones come into picture, and this is how they affect the brain. And as I said, the other reason of how different people or the same person in different situations, they behave differently. So I hope that satisfies your answer, or that gives your answer to your question. So thank you, Kashyap. For the people who are here, I'll also ask them to start asking questions, whatever questions you have. And I have a question by Jyoti, and the question is inductive and deductive type of reasoning. Okay, so the easiest way to explain inductive and deductive reasoning is through the process of what is induction and deduction. In one kind of reasoning, you have limited information, and from that limited information, you forecast. Think about weather forecasting. In weather forecasting, what happens is you have very specific information, and then you want to do generalized, some kind of a generalized observation or some kind of a generalized predictions. So you have, let's say, weather for 3 days or 4 days or 1 week, and based on that, you want to predict the forecast or behavior, the weather behavior for the whole month. So what you do is you take in some data sample, run in some kind of a statistics, and based on that, you do the prediction. This is inductive. In inductive, what happens is an induction happens. So you have small information, you have specific information, and from there, you try to forecast or try to predict more general conclusions. So specific conclusions leading to general conclusions, or more elaborate conclusions is inductive. The reverse is true for deductive. In this, you have a lot of information given to you, and from that, you have to specifically or narrow it down using a reductionist approach. In deductive reasoning, you have a lot of information given to you, and from there, what you have to do is you have to narrow it down and come to very specific conclusion. So one is something called the bottom up, so it starts building in, and the other is something called the top down approach, from top to bottom. The reverse is true. So in one, specific to general, in the other, from general to specific, and that is the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning. So Saurabh has a question. Sir, can CS students go in this domain? Yes, very much. CS students or computer science students can actually go in this domain. In the domain of psychology, particularly in cognitive psychology, remember that most programming languages or most programs, the way they work is actually been trained on how the human brain works, and the working of the human brain or understanding how the mind works is a subject matter of cognitive psychology, which is kind of an offshoot of this course. Now, there are two courses running at present. One is human behavior, the other is cognitive psychology. In cognitive psychology, we just look at that pattern of how the information processing happens in the brain. That's me another question. Thank you, sir. It's very fascinating, and I'm not interested in this field, sir. I'm a civil engineering graduate. Can you suggest new ways to get into psychology to understand it more? I'm sorry, it says that I'm more interested in this field. I'm very sorry, Lakshmi. So yes, you're a civil engineering graduate and you want to get into psychology. That's very good. I started as a science student myself, and psychology interested me, and I shifted and finished my program at IIT Bombay, then went abroad, finished my PhD there, and a postdoc there, and then came back to India and started doing this job. So there's a lot of scope for engineering students, whether you're from civil engineering or engineering. The best thing to understand is that most science students are well trained. And what psychology requires, at least the branch that I work in, that's experimental psychology, requires you to have the discipline of a science. And once you have that, you are well fit into this particular course. Now, what can you do to get into psychology and understand it more? Start with a very basic book. Start reading very basic books about psychology, and they'll tell you about what is psychology. Generally speaking, psychology is majorly divided into two fields. One is the cognition part, the experimental part, and other is the non-experimental part, the social part. Even within social psychology, you have an experimental part, and experimental psychology is a very fascinating field. Once you get into it, you will start realizing that the field covers how human mind works or human brain works, and you have a lot of scope, right from building neural network models to mathematical modeling of human behavior, and all those knowledge that you have given in your that you have got in your engineering studies can apply. On the other hand, you have a more non-experimental version of psychology where you start looking at why do people do something, looking at something called health psychology, or you have something called social psychology, where you can still bring in the experimental approach there, but there is some pure non-experimental work also. And when you come and start studying this, or start with a very basic book on psychology, you will find it very interesting. Why it is interesting, or why it was interesting for me, is that it gave me an opportunity to study myself, or to study something which is like me. It's very easy, or it's very good to study as a third person viewer, or as a person who is outside the field of action. So when you do a natural science, you are standing somewhere else and you are seeing things interact and make predictions. But when you have to run these predictions on yourself or people like you, it becomes really interesting, because then you have to think and find innovative ways how to get the thing running. The models have also to be taken this way. So I'll encourage you to start reading about psychology. You're free to contact me whenever you want. There is an email that you have that you can already approach to. You can register for more courses that I have, and what you can do is you can posting questions. Sorry, and that's how you learn psychology. So I hope that answers your question. Now I have another question by Laud Swami, and good evening, sir. Good evening. So the portion is very vast. Can you reduce the portion or make the summary? It's not actually vast. What has happened is that you're trying to cram it, right? I do understand it's a little bit out of context. So in 20 lectures, I'm trying to finish everything. But look at it. If you spend some time with it, just don't look at one lecture in one. What you do is take a lecture and break it down to many parts. Now, when you do a course like this into 20 lectures, what happens is you have to cram in a lot of things into it. Basically, there are 4 or 5 sections that I have covered within this 20 lectures. So cannot be, I tried to reduce it, but it cannot be. As for the summary lecture, there is a 21st lecture, or I think the 22nd lecture, which is a summary lecture, which covers everything that is there. If you want more comprehensive summary, what you could do is just write me a mail. I have a summary, or I could probably ask one of my students or TAs to prepare a summary for you, and they can post it for you if you want that. But basically, this is the most compression that we can do for the course. So I do agree with you. 20 weeks trying to, in 8 weeks or 20 lectures trying to cover the whole thing is really, it's difficult. Any entrance exams? So what? Yes, there is an entrance exam that you can take. You can take a GATE. Now, I think for the past 2 or 3 years, there is a XH paper for humanities, social sciences, and there you have psychology as a subject. So you can probably have a GATE, or you can take a GATE in psychology. That's one exam that I can think of. You can take psychology and appear for civil services if you wish. So 2 exams that I can think of. Rajesh Kumar, good evening, sir. Good evening, Rajesh. So please ask your question, whatever you have, and I'll start answering them. If people who are watching me on this team meet, if they also wish to ask a question, they can always put a question on this chat box that I have. So you can put questions on this chat box, and I can start answering those questions for. Engineering qualification not allowed, sir. Okay. Let me get back to you on that because I'm not sure what is the qualification for other. Um, I think with a civil engineering degree, you can probably try for a PhD in one of the national institutes, IITs. They may take you for a PhD. As for other examinations, as I said, civil services is the other exam that I can think of, which sort of gives you that freedom of taking any course that you want, and that could be a best option. So whether be it a state service or the central service, you can probably do that. Or if you want to do a master's type of course, then there are some universities, probably government universities also, which allow you to go masters in psychology. So I think that you can try. Right, and I'll get back to you on the XH thing. I'm not very sure of what qualification they allow or not, but that's for. Let me get back to you. So all those people who are here and who are watching right now with me, I'll ask them to ask your questions. I'm here for another 5-10 minutes if you don't ask a question, but if you ask a question, I'm here with you for another half an hour. So please go ahead, ask questions, and I'll start answering them. So there is another question, and that talks about what is motor behavior. So motor behavior basically all those actions that you do, the motor actions that you do. For example, you want to pick up a cup. Now, at the cognitive level, the brain will frame this sequence of processes which will connect the input and output system. The output system, which be it your hand or leg or any other body part which does a certain action, and the connection that the brain makes with this particular body part is what is motor behavior. For example, if you want to pick up a cup, now the brain has to make this decision that you want to pick up a cup, finalize this decision, and send it as a signal to your hand to make some muscles make the right movement and pick up a cup. Now this action of some muscles and some group of bones and some group of the whole hand for that matter, making these actions to reaching the cup, identifying the cup first of all, reaching it, picking it up, and putting it wherever it wants to. This is called motor behavior, right? So does qualifying CAS, IR, NET, Earth Sciences get me into this field? No, that won't, because Earth Sciences has to do with geology, I guess, and geography, geology, that kind of a thing. So we'll get you into this field. So CSIR NET can be done in psychology. That is for sure that I'm sure about. Or only life sciences qualified candidates are allowed to pursue psychology. It's not so. People from engineering background have pursued psychology. I even have 3 graduate students who were actually engineers, and they graduated as in experimental psychology. So it's not that people who are from life sciences only qualify. So I have graduated 3 engineering students into doing psychology and finishing a PhD in psychology. So there is your answer. So other people can also pursue psychology. It doesn't really it doesn't really matter a lot if you are from an engineering graduate and you want to do psychology. All you have to do is to have an interest and to have the willingness to go forward and finish the PhD. Dementia. Dementia is basically it's a kind of memory disorder when you have a partial loss of some kind of past information. So when it's basically do with the loss of information or the loss of accessibility of information within the brain. Dementia generally is caused by some biological reasons, and since because of that you are not able to. Generally, it happens in towards your later ages, and so because of that you're not able to access those connections with stored memory, and because of that you display certain kind of forgetting or certain kind of non-accessibility of information, which in generic terms is called loss of information or loss of memory. So that's what dementia is all about. Okay, so for other people, I hope that answers your question, motive. So other people who are here, please go ahead, ask your questions. Rajesh has a question. So can you tell us the exam pattern? So Rajesh, I've answered this before also, but again for you, I'll do that. The exam pattern is supposed to be or is going to be a multiple choice question set. So you'll have 50 questions in total, 2 marks for each question, 100 marks in total, 50 questions. Some of these questions will be from assignment. Some of these questions will be based on assignment, and some of the questions will be new to, but it will be from the course, and that is how your final exam would be. Right. So I hope that answers your question, Rajesh. Other people who are here, please go ahead, ask your questions. I'm here for you. I will sit here for answering questions. Give me a question and I'll answer that with whatever knowledge that I have about this subject matter. And that's how this particular live session goes about. So another question, feeling, thoughts, emotions, how they can be different with respect to brain. Then what and when does mind come into picture? Okay. Great. So Lakshmi, really need to read a book on psychology first, and that should give you more scope. But let me answer this question. So feelings and emotions are controlled by a part of the brain which is called amygdala, and thought is more a rational part of the brain. So it's from the right hemisphere or from the right side of the brain. If you look at feelings and emotions, they come from the left side of the brain. There are multiple theories. So one theory says it's the right hand dominance in terms of emotions and feelings, but there's another theory which talks about both the regions of the brain coming in. So basically, thought or thinking takes in the frontal part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and then you have the central brain, the middle temporal lobe, which has the memory, because thinking or thought process requires you to have matter on which to think. For example, I'm thinking about a particular cup. Now, the idea that what is a cup and what does it really mean, or what is the concept of the cup, these are stored in somewhere in the middle temporal lobe as a memory. But the decision of when I say cup and how a cup is different from a glass or something else will require something called the prefrontal cortex. And so these regions are the brain area. So main difference is both the feeling and emotions are controlled by a different region, the amygdala, and thoughts are controlled by another region, but all of them do interact with each other. But this is how the differentiation is all about. Now, how does the mind come into picture? So if you look at the brain is only a network of wires that you have. So these wires are connected to each other through a synapse. So think of it as a large circuit which has a lot of wires, and these wires transfer electrical potentials from one point to another. And then there is a junction which is called a chemical junction through which this information also passes through. Now within these junctions, within these junctions or within these wires, you have the connections which make up your memory. So if you look into the brain, it is just wires, and wires do not create the way we think or the way we are or who we are. So what creates it? It's an abstraction that is called the mind. So what is mind? Mind is the doing of the brain. So whatever happens in terms of the wires, think of a computer. Now you have a chip, and within that chip or within that board, you have different currents passing through different junctions at different point of different transistors are there, different kind of electronic components are there. But just looking at the chip or just looking at the motherboard is not the computer. You need the software to run on top of the hardware. And this software actually does things for you. The hardware is essential, but the hardware has to be interpreted by a software. Similar to that is the idea of your brain and mind. The brain is the hardware. It is the one where the process happens. But then you need something on top of it, an abstraction which is sitting on top of it, which does the function of explaining, or which does the function of interpreting, and that is what the mind is. I hope this explains what is the difference between the mind and the brain, and how these feeling, thoughts, and emotions are differentiated at the level of the brain. Right? Okay. Robert Barron, Girish and Mishra, Psychology, 5th edition, helpful for me. It would be. It's a good book. If you look at Robert Barron's and Girish and Mishra's book, it's a wonderful book, I would say. Robert Barron is a champion in social psychology, and his book on general psychology or psychology as such is very good. Adding Girish and Mishra gives you an Indian viewpoint. So what or how psychology is interpreted in with an Indian perspective is what Girish Mishra brings to this whole mixture of Robert Barron. And studying this book will not only tell you what the West thinks about psychology and what is the knowledge of West about psychology, adding in Girish Mishra gives you a whole new perspective of looking at psychology from the Indian viewpoint. Although in all the chapters you won't find that, but then in most of the chapters there is an Indian interpretation of the psychology or different sessions of the psychology. It's a wonderful book to read. Right? But if you want to go about and read more into it on in-depth knowledge, there is a book by Hilgard and Atkinson on psychology. It's probably a little bit old book, but it has most of the theories and explains psychology in the most precise manner. Probably one of my favorite books. So on one hand, Girish Mishra and Robert Barron is going to give you a new perspective, a much fresher perspective. Looking at Hilgard and Atkinson will give you the basics of psychology. Of course, this is the general of it. And so as you dwell deep into it, as you go more deeper and deeper into it, you will find more books and you'll start liking the courses of psychology. Right. So I believe that answers your question, Lakshmi. For other people who are here, if you have questions, please go ahead, ask questions. I'm here for another 15 minutes. It's 43 minutes past 3. I'm here for another hour. We started this whole interaction at 3 o'clock, so probably ending it by, this is the 1 hour session, so we're ending it by 4. So I have 15 odd minutes left. If you don't have a question, I'll have